Hi, this is John Ondo from Marketing, Media, and Cupcakes. And before we get into today's episode, I just want to say thank you so much for listening. We're back after being gone for over 4.5 years. And I hope you get a chance to listen to episode 77, where we explain why we were gone for so long and that we're back for at least 3 more episodes. Angel and I are big supporters of entrepreneurship, and we love small businesses and faith-based businesses. And we just want to encourage you through our podcast each week. What's going to determine if we continue with more episodes will be the response. Subscribe to us on your platform. Send us an email at john@ondomedia.com. That would help us know you're listening and you want more episodes. So thank you so much, and let's get into today's episode.
This is the small business podcast that is sweeter than all the rest. Marketing, Media, and Cupcakes.
Welcome. I am John Ondo, along with my beautiful wife, Angel.
Hi there.
She has a cupcake business she does on the side. Her full-time gig is a customer service representative, and I am a media producer director, and we have a podcast company that we're launching, and it's a busy time at the Marketing, Media, and Cupcakes headquarters here. But today we have a guest coming back with us, and I'm so excited. Dr. Gleb Seversky. He is a disaster avoidance expert. He's written a book called Never Go With Your Gut, How Pioneering Leaders Make the Best Decisions and Avoid Business Disasters. And we're going to throw some things at him today. Thanks for joining us, by the way.
Thank you so much for having me back. It's a pleasure.
Oh, it's wonderful. And if you haven't listened to the first one, if you're just catching this one, go back and listen to the first one, because a lot of good stuff on there.
If you don't have access to a time machine, you're going to need to hear this episode, because we all make mistakes in decisions. And even though we think business leaders are perfect and they do everything right, they often don't. But sometimes there's the mistakes, and then there's really big foul-ups. And so those can be avoided, and that's what Dr. Gleb is talking to us about. So let's talk a little bit. Let's kind of throw this at first. His book is called Never Go With Your Gut, which I think runs counterintuitive to most of us who, I think I'm a little bit of an entrepreneur, but most of us are like, go out there and get it and go with your gut and so forth. Why is never going with your gut a good idea? Because everybody else says it is.
I'm a cognitive neuroscientist and behavioral economist. That's my background. I've spent over 15 years in academia studying these topics, looking at evidence-based business. Just like medicine, started looking at evidence-based medicine. And now we know that snake oil is not good for us.
Right.
Now we know that, the person who tells you to do the comfortable thing and take, the dozen donuts, imagine if your doctor told you, hey, how about you go eat these dozen donuts and sit on the couch and watch Netflix all day.
And you'll be cured.
Yes, exactly. That's great advice. That feels very good.
Yes, it does. Go with your gut. Let's do it.
Exactly.
Get a big gut that
slouch
way.
out, right? It feels good. Now based on a lot of studies, that that's not going to actually help you.
No.
So hopefully you won't listen to the doctor. Unfortunately, people listen to going with their gut, the comfortable device of these coaches and leaders and gurus who tell you to be primal, be savage, do the natural thing, go ahead, do what you want to do, be authentic. That's very bad. Our authentic selves are not adapted, as I mentioned, for the modern environment. We need to actually do the counterintuitive, hard things that lead us to our goals, like put on our sweats and go to the gym, or resist from taking the third chocolate chip cookie. The second one is A-okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So we need to do the hard things. We know we need to do the hard things for our physical health. Now the cutting edge research, the evidence-based business research that I'm looking at and working with shows that we need to do the hard counterintuitive things to be mentally fit and make the best decisions in our business. So mental fitness requires doing the same counterintuitive things that physical fitness requires.
Wow.
Dr. Gleb is our guest today, and he has a book called Never Go With Your Gut. He also is part of a group that tries to help businesses avoid disasters, because you don't want to have there are teams of people who come in after you've had the disaster. That's not fun. You would rather avoid it than have to do that.
Ben Franklin has a great quote that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and that's
true.
That's my own motto. That's where we want to go. You want to have that ounce of prevention. You don't want to get the pound of cure.
I'm a bit of an aviation geek, and
please tell me, because I'm I don't know what's happening.
Well, my stepson also has an aviation degree and works for not with a major carrier, but we've talked about this, and I talked with a couple other guys that, Boeing was just rock solid. They couldn't do anything wrong. There would be an occasional glitch or something that they would fix, but suddenly now they got the Max jet, the Max 737 that is still, at the time this airs, I'm sure it's still not going to be there. And then there's another, they're discontinuing another issue with their, basically it's the primary bodies of their planes. And it's tragic. I go back to a NASA situation where we lost 3 astronauts in 1968 because there was all kinds of problems with the Apollo 1 space capsule, but nobody cared to fix them because we had to get to the moon in a year. And what happened was they overlooked enough that 3 people died on the launch pad. Is that what we're kind of dealing with Boeing in situations like that, where people are just like, I don't care how wrong everything is. We're just going to keep pushing.
Well, Boeing is a little bit of a victim of its own success. Yeah. It had a very good history, like you're saying. And because it had a very good history, it played into one of the dangerous judgment errors that we all have, called cognitive biases, because of how our brain is wired due to our evolutionary heritage and just the information processing capacity of our brain. The key cognitive bias here is called the normalcy bias. The normalcy bias is the idea that if everything has been going okay in the past, it will keep going okay in the future. A lot of people fell prey to this in 2007 when they bought a house and thinking that, everything will keep going up, the house price will keep going up. And of course they didn't.
Absolutely.
So that's an example of the normalcy bias, where people couldn't imagine that there would be a huge stock market crash. So the people at Boeing, the leadership at Boeing, they couldn't imagine that the 737 MAX would be more dangerous than their previous planes, because their history of their planes has always been the case that newer planes were safer.
Cheaper to operate, better to run. Yeah.
Yes, and the 737 MAX was actually in some ways safer in many ways than the previous plane, than the regular 737. It was more dangerous than others, which we can talk about, but it was safer in many ways. So they made this plane which was more efficient, safer from their perspective, and they ignored the engineers inside the company and the plant managers who were saying that, who are raising alarms, saying, there's some serious issues here, there's issues here. They were ignoring these people, and they said, no, it can't be possible. It's impossible for this plane to not be safe. They're just, we'll ignore these people. They're losers. They're not giving us the right information.
And you call this what do you call
the normalcy bias?
Normalcy bias,
right?
Okay.
Same thing. And who knows what's facing us? What we are experiencing normalcy bias around right now. I think one of the biggest normalcy bias experiences that we have as a society is in the environment and the danger to the environment right now. Everything has been okay with the environment in the past, therefore there will not be problems in the future. But separate topic. We can talk about that later.
Well,
so the Boeing,
you can see it in the Titanic. That was a normalcy bias. Well, the ship's not going to sink. It won't possibly hit an iceberg, and it managed to hit the iceberg on the first. And it was a series of issues that they lost. I'm a big history guy, but it's the same thing. Well, this can't happen.
Yes, the unsinkable ship, right?
Right.
So with the 737 MAX, the normalcy bias was so bad for the Boeing leadership, so terrible, that when the first crash happened, over 100 people killed, and a number of people said, like, "Hey, this is an issue. Let's address this." The Boeing reacted very poorly, very slowly. They issued an instruction saying, "Hey, here's more information about the MACS, which is what actually caused the crash, the software." And they didn't actually do anything about it, and they were than issuing the instruction.
And they were blaming the airline. Your pilots weren't trained properly, and all that stuff.
And so that was a very big problem, because, of course, it's not the issue that the pilots were not trained properly. Boeing was not recognizing the kind of pilots who would be flying its airplanes, who didn't get as much training as some other pilots. But that's Boeing. Boeing needed to know that these are the pilots who are going to be flying the airplane. So it took another crash for Boeing. And even after that crash, if you look at the history of the crash, Boeing was very reluctant to ground the airplane. And it took a lot of the world government aviation authorities to eventually get the 737 MAX grounded, because Boeing, again, the Boeing leadership couldn't imagine that it was at fault.
Well, there was an outcry even in Congress, and they were even like doing the same thing where people were saying it needs to be grounded in Congress, and different people were saying it's Boeing. It can't be Boeing's fault.
Exactly, and that's a normalcy bias,
Yeah.
because Boeing had such a history
Great
of
record,
safety.
yeah.
And so that's what very often leads us astray. The normalcy bias leads a lot of companies in exactly the wrong direction because they keep going in the same direction where they were heading. They don't recognize that the environment changed or the product changed or something changed. So this is a big error that leads, Boeing has at last count lost about 26 billion in market cap.
Yeah.
That's 26 with a B billion in market capitalization. That's an unimaginable amount of money, to me at least.
Yeah, I can't imagine it.
So that's the kind of losses that Boeing suffered. And it's ludicrous to think that, when we look back, that the Boeing leadership didn't make the decision to pull the 737 MAX after the first crash at least. But hey, here we are. And we see that these people who are very smart people, you don't get to the top of Boeing without being very smart, they still fall into the same dangerous judgment errors because these dangerous judgment errors, these cognitive biases, they're not about intelligence. They're not. This is not what they're about. They're not about intelligence. They're about the way our brain is wired. And sometimes, in some cases, the more intelligent you are, the more vulnerable you are. Because some of these cognitive biases, they cause more intelligent people to be more able to argue themselves out of making the right decision. And so this is a big problem with cognitive biases, that people who think they're not susceptible to them because they're intelligent tend to be even more susceptible than they think they might be.
Is that where maybe the term was that, we always jokingly say at work, well, it requires common sense. And a lot of people were like, yeah, but not everybody has common sense. Because you take people who are extremely bright and yet they're not, they wouldn't come in out of the rain. They would be standing there pondering the rain versus, hello, you're getting wet, come in. So I think that's almost what you're saying is that level, they're beyond thinking of it at a different, I hate to say normal, but I'm just saying the intellectual piece gets them overwhelmed.
So sometimes that's the case. Sometimes people overthink it. There's a specific cognitive bias called information bias, where people try to gather too much information before making a decision. So gathering more and more information than they need to make a decision.
And sometimes that leads to the paralysis thing too, where they don't make a decision.
Analysis paralysis.
Yeah.
So that's the information bias. So a really important part of making a decision is deciding what information is important before you actually go into the decision. Because otherwise, one problem that you might run into is this analysis paralysis, where you tend to gather too much information.
Right.
So, but if you decide that, hey, this is the information that's important, then you'll gather that information and then you'll make a decision. And of course, the bigger the decision, the more information you'll want to gather.
The first thing you say in the 8 steps is to identify for a decision to be made. What does that mean? Obviously, that's kind of simple.
It's not simple at all.
I'm an idiot again.
Oh, it's okay, John. So, Boeing didn't identify the need for a decision to be made after the first 737 MAX crashed. Looking back, we can all, a lot of people were saying that, hey, you need to address the situation, but they didn't. So they didn't identify the need for a decision to be made. And then even after the second one, they tried to say, no, the 737 MAX is safe. We don't need to ground it. That cost them much more money, much more trust, credibility. 26 billion market cap. That's not counting all the credibility that's lost.
Sure.
The Boeing is never going to be said with the marker of safety. This is a safe
Right.
thing. That reputation loss is huge.
Yeah, you can't put a price on that.
Huge. And the fact that, after the second crash, that they pushed against grounding, that's another sign that, hey, Boeing can't be trusted. So they didn't identify the need for a decision to be made in a timely manner.
We'll just give that a mulligan and move on. And so the lack of decision is the decision, as we always kind of say too.
So identify the need for a decision to be made. That's a big question that you need to think about.
So number 2, you say gather relevant information from a variety of perspectives, which from a marketing standpoint, which I have a little bit of that, that's always you want to have different, we always say in television, we want to have a different set of eyeballs on different things. Tell me a little bit about how do you pick the perspectives? Because of course, course, what we always do is, hey, Angel, doesn't this show look great? Yeah, she tells me it looks great. And, I didn't really ask maybe the target. So tell me a little bit about how do you pick those perspectives?
You want to look at perspectives who disagree with you. So the relevant
I don't like those people, though.
Yeah,
I don't really want to hear
sorry
from them.
to hear, John. Yeah, that's too bad for you, John. You want to look for people who disagree with you, because if you're just looking for yes men or women,
Right.
that's not really going to help you make the right decision. It will help you feel good with a decision.
Sure.
It will help you feel comfortable, but you need to go outside of your comfort zone, do the counterintuitive thing to make the decision that's actually good for your goals. And this is the 8-step decision-making model for making major decisions. So here you don't want to screw up and you want to maximize success, both of those. So you want to gather information from a variety of perspectives, especially people who disagree with you, and the relevant information, that's about the important information. You want to decide what information is important, so you don't keep gathering information, not making the decision.
So step 3, I have a feeling most people, including myself, I would have said, well, this should be step 1. Decide goals, paint a clear vision, desired outcome. And I'm a big vision person, so I've always been told you need that vision first, and then everything falls under it. But you've got it as number 3 here.
You do not need that vision first, because your vision will be screwed up if you don't gather relevant information from people with different perspectives first.
Gotcha.
Because what happens, first of all, you might miss the need for a decision to be made, which is why the first step is there. Second, gathering relevant information. You want to always do that before you paint a vision, before you decide on your goals, because you might have different goals after you gather the information. You might have a different vision. And if you paint a vision first, think about what happens. Now, let's say you decide that you want to launch a business, and you look on Google saying, what are all the great reasons for me to launch a podcast business?
Right.
What kind of answer will Google get
Right.
for you?
Oh.
Versus, should I launch a podcast business?
Right.
Or, pros and cons of launching a podcast business. So if you make a decision, essentially you make a decision in advance,
Yeah.
and you paint your goals in advance, you will screw up the information gathering process. So you never want to paint a clear picture and goals before you gather the information.
So number 4 is develop clear decision-making criteria to evaluate options. This is where my often detail sleepy nature comes in. I'm like, okay, can we skip 4? So what does that mean? Clear decision-making criteria to evaluate options.
So let's talk about your world. You mentioned a website. What kind of criteria are there for making decisions about a website? You want to, let's say, have it be clean, for example.
Sure.
You want it to be mobile friendly. You want it to have appropriate content and all of this stuff. And all of these things, surprisingly, they often are somewhat contradictory.
Yes.
Yes. They're going to somewhat contradict each other. Having all the information available, having it be clean, having it be mobile friendly, all of these things. So you want to decide what are the important criteria. I'm sure you can have 100 criteria for a website.
Sure.
But what are going to be the 5 important ones? You can choose 5 or you can choose 10. You should not choose more than 10. But aim, let's say, for 5. Then, how important is each going to be? Mobile friendly. Do you anticipate that 95% of the people who hit your website are going to come from a smartphone? Then you probably are going to have that as the most important criteria, for example.
Sure. Okay.
Or do you want it to be really comprehensive? You want to make sure that people who come, they can learn everything about you from the website. So you want to decide on the criteria and their importance in relation to each other.
Prioritizing on the thing. Oh, that's cool. So the next one is number 5, generate viable options that can achieve goals.
Right. And this is going to be, again, a surprising thing because most people will generate viable options before they make the criteria.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that's bad.
Yeah.
That's a bad thing because then once you generate your options, you will screw up the criterion decision, the process. So if you create the website first,
Sure.
and if you create free versions of a website, let's say free viable options, what are you going to do with the criteria? You're already going to be anchored by the free website versions, and you're going to screw up the criteria process. So you want to generate the criteria before you choose the options. Now, it's going to be really important for you to generate, again, this is maximizing success. Most people, especially in small businesses, they tend to choose the first viable options that they see. They, look at they look at options and they try to generate them, and they say, okay, this is good enough. Let's go forward.
Yeah.
And that's bad. That's bad if you want to maximize success because, talking about the website, your website is going to be incredibly important.
Absolutely.
That's your digital property. It's going to represent you. So it's really worthwhile to spend more resources on it than you would intuitively spend on, some kind of flyer that you're going to leave in a library, shelf somewhere.
Sure.
So this is going to be really important. Or let's say choosing the location of your cupcake bakery. That's going to be a critical decision.
Yes.
So many things. You might want to spend much more time on it than it intuitively feels like you should, because that's going to be really important. And you want to choose at least 5 viable options for that.
Almost,
so at least
it almost sounds like home buying, because I know you go through and you just like, oh, this is good enough, I'll just buy it. I don't want to shop it anymore. But your suggestion really is you really do need to have more options to choose from, no matter what.
You need to have at least 5 viable options if you're taking this a serious project, a serious decision. Again, you don't want to choose the first acceptable one for many reasons. The main thing is that you want to maximize success. So this is a strategy not only for avoiding failure, but also for maximizing success. So generate viable options.
Okay.
Number 6 is weigh the options, picking the best of the bunch. That sounds really easy, but I have a feeling you're going to tell me, no, John, it's not.
It's not as easy as it seems, because what you want to do is, let's say you have 5 viable options. Then take the criteria that you have. Let's say, on your website, let's say you have having content, you rate it on a scale of 1 to 10 of importance, you rate it importance 9. Then you have mobile friendly, you rate it importance 6. Whatever the weighting is. So you weigh them, and then you rank each of the options of the website, or whatever you're choosing, on each of the criteria. And then you multiply them out, the criteria by the options, and you choose the best of the bunch. So this is going to be a transparent, mathematically informed process that helps you make the best decision.
We're up to step 7, which is implement the option that you chose. So again, that sounds kind of straightforward.
Well, there's more complexity than a straightforward thing. There's 2 aspects to implementation. And what you want to do is, first of all, imagine that this option completely failed. So before you implement it, imagine that it completely failed. Then think about all the reasons why it failed for the website. Maybe Angel went on it and found that it was totally not satisfactory for her needs.
Yes.
So maybe you want to run it by her before you do that. And that's a way of addressing failure. So address everything, run it by people who are going to be detail-oriented like Angel. Also have contingencies. So let's say you are deciding on the headquarters for your bakery. Maybe you want to have a contingency where you can get out of the contract in the first 3 months if you discover something that you didn't see early on.
Gotcha.
So that can be something that you address in advance, that you have a contingency. That's going to be one part of it. Second, imagine that this succeeded beyond your wildest dreams. Your website was featured on National Cupcakery of the month. Yes, exactly. So it succeeded beyond your wildest dreams. Why did it succeed? Think about all the reasons why it was successful. The most awesome website ever for Cupcake Place.
Sure.
And how can you ensure that it succeeds that way? Maybe you can run it by a number of people who are going to use it, by your customer base. And you can also make sure that there are contingencies in place for if something unexpected comes up. So for example, if another cupcake place that's a competitor goes out of business, are you going to be able to have the money to buy their equipment?
Sure.
And that's going to be, they're going to be having a fire sale, right?
Right.
And you want to be able to, get their equipment, get their staff or something like that, and be able to use that. And if you have all your resources dedicated to your existing equipment and existing plans, you're not going to be able to seize that opportunity. So you want to have contingency plans in place for what happens if there's an unexpected opportunity and for you to seize it. So that's going to be step 8. You want to address failure, maximize success.
The last one, which almost sounds like rinse, wash, and repeat, or whatever it is evaluate implementation process and revise as needed. It sounds like this is go back to square one to some extent, because you're going to keep doing this process.
Well, what you want to do as part of that process is make sure that you have measurements. Very often we don't measure our implementation. So you have some kind of concrete measurements that allow you to evaluate things. Very often we don't. So let's say, with a cupcake place, let's say you want to get a profit of at least $25,000 in the first 6 months.
Sure.
And if you don't have that, that's going to be a serious revision. Or the website, you want to see how long people stay on the website page and what they click through. And if they don't click on the pages that you think they should click through, then you want to seriously revise your website in a certain amount of time.
Okay.
So those are going to be measurements. You want to make sure to have clear, concrete measurements of the outcomes that you want to achieve, and then revise things based on the measurements. If you don't have measurements, which very often people don't, especially in small businesses because they want to rush ahead, that's going to seriously hurt you going down the road.
And did they choose not to have those things written down? Because that means if you don't have it written down, then you can't fail.
Yes. Yeah. And that's a big problem too.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you want to figure out, okay, I'm failing. That's great. That gives me information, and I can choose to change things without yet having lost my life savings.
Right.
Exactly.
Wow, this stuff is phenomenal, and I always try to, as a filmmaker and marketing guy, to get in the heads of my audience. But when you even have broken it down with some of this, I'm sitting back saying I have some flaws in my decision making process, that especially like the first one I look at here is the vision and the goals, which I would normally put number one. He has it number 3. So never go with your gut. This is all in the book, correct?
This is all in the book.
So never go with your gut. How pioneering leaders make best decisions and avoid business disasters. Give us the rundown of not only where we can get the book, but where we can get you to come and speak or do a virtual conference or something like that as well.
Sure. So the book is available at bookstores everywhere. Never Go With Your Gut, How Pioneering Leaders Make the Best Decisions and Avoid Business Disasters, published by Career Press, good traditional publisher. So physical bookstores, online bookstores, whether Barnes & Noble online or in person, Amazon online, props to indie bookstores
there you go.
In person. Then you can check out my work on disasteravoidanceexperts.com. Again, disasteravoidanceexperts.com. There's blogs, videos, articles, my consulting, coaching, and training services. I do speaking and training around the world, mostly in the United States, but around the world as a whole. I was in Salzburg recently in Austria. That was interesting. Wow. Then you can get more information about my consulting services and my coaching services. And I do that in person and virtually as well. And of course, you can check out an online video course of 8 modules for free at disasteravoidanceexperts.com/subscribe. Again, disasteravoidanceexperts.com/subscribe. And I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. Connect with me there. Dr. Gleb Tsipursky, GLEBTSIPURSKY.
And we'll have all those links on our information for the podcast. I know there are people at Sears and at Kodak and a lot of other places that are saying, I wish we had Gleb in to talk to us about this.
For sure.
Because we sit back and just think, how could this happen? But it happens, and it happens. And it's really the fear I have is, what am I missing? Did I miss the boat on this? And I'm always questioning myself because I don't want to be you remember that Ondo Media guy who thought that, guy, because and then there's really funny things like vinyl. Vinyl came back. Nobody saw that, but that was kind of fun. And there's so weird things happen, and it's good if you get good decision making process. So, Gleb, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes, thank you so much.
And
it's been a pleasure.
If you want to get in contact with us, follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and we're going to be expanding some things soon. But we're so glad. We love our listeners, and these were a little longer shows, but you know what? I think who cares? Content is great.
They're worth every minute.
Absolutely. So whatever it is going in your life, if you have something we can do to help you out, encourage your small business, let us know, because we want you to live the dream.
Connect with John and Angel via Facebook and Instagram and let us know your thoughts. Marketing, Media, and Cupcakes is a production of Ondo Media.